There are women in all the areas of photography, in fashion and portrait photography, in street and documentary photography, as well as in war photography, of course. There are many women photographers in the history of photography. The problem, perhaps, is that we don't know them, and it's not just perhaps, we don't.
From one book to the next, we always find the same big names. Of course, geniuses are always very male in our world. So we've excluded huge numbers of women who are in fact quite extraordinary.
A history of women in photography would be interesting if it were the intertwined history of two issues, the status of women and the status of photography. When did photography emerge? And female photographers? Do they have a different perspective? Does photography offer a different perspective on the world? So I think women in photography and photography are perhaps really just the same thing, or the same history anyway.
Well, then let's take a dive into history. First of all, we know that for centuries, women were kept away from any kind of artistic activity. So while it was unthinkable for them to study painting or sculpture, the arrival of photography in 1839 would be a boon for them. It was an emerging discipline, not officially considered an art yet, and it could be learned on one's own. Women were thus free to venture out into this uncharted territory.
There have always been women in photography since the very first minute, and certainly the absence of hundreds of years of great male masters hovering, over their heads meant that you were not having to pit yourself against centuries of tradition of male accomplishment. There was no Michelangelo of photography.
Compared to the legitimate forms of art, such as sculpture or painting, it's true that photography finally gave women the opportunity to try their hand at an artistic practice that, in spite of its technical complexity, was, if your financial and perhaps social position allowed it, relatively accessible.